Hello, everyone. I would like to, good afternoon, and open this meeting today on Assembly Legislative Operations and Elections. Despite the fact that my vice chair believes that I do not gavel in loud enough, I feel it's the appropriate amount of gavel. So with that, new committee secretary, can you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Dickman. Here. Assemblyman Frierson. Assemblywoman Gonzalez. Here. Assemblywoman Howdeggy. Here. Assemblyman Levitt. Here. Assemblyman Matthews. Here. Assemblyman MacArthur. Here. Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. Here. Assemblywoman Thomas. Here. Assemblywoman Torres. Here. Chair Miller.
Here. And please mark Speaker Frierson absent excused. With that, just a few little updates. Of course, we know that social distancing and mask wearing is required in committee. We will have one bill today, and we will also take up to 30 minutes of public comment after the hearing. So with our one bill that we have today, we will be hearing SJR 7. It will be presented by Senator Dondero Loop and Assemblyman Thomas Roberts. Thank you. Nice to meet you, Assemblyman Roberts. Yes. And this is a measure that proposes to amend the Nevada Constitution to remove the constitutional provisions governing the election and the duties of the Board of Regents. And so with that, I will open the hearing on SJR 7 and give the Senator and the Assemblyman a moment to prepare. But we are ready for you, so when you are ready, please commence.
Thank you, Chair Miller and committee members. And Chair Miller, I would say anybody who represents Assembly District 5 has the exact amount of right gavel. So I would
Thank you, Senator and former Assemblywoman of Assembly District 5.
Thank you, Madam. So for the record, I am Marilyn Dondero Loop, representing Senate District 8 in Clark County. I am pleased to be joined today by Assemblyman Tom Roberts, representing Assembly District 13. We are presenting Senate Joint Resolution 7, the Nevada Higher Education Reform, Accountability, and Oversight Amendment, which relates to the governance of the University of Nevada system. I am sure many of you are aware of the general contents of the bill. Nonetheless, I will start with some introductory comments, and Mr. Roberts will provide additional comments after me. As you know, the Nevada Constitution requires the legislature to provide the establishment of a state university that is controlled by an elected board of regents whose duties are prescribed by law. Additionally, the Nevada Constitution provides for the Board of Regents to control and manage the affairs and funds of the state university under regulations established by law. Senate Joint Resolution 7 proposes to remove the constitutional provisions governing election and duties of the Board of Regents and its control and management of the affairs and funds of the state university. Instead, SJR 7 would require the legislature to provide by law for the governance of the state university. I want to stress that SJR 7 does not repeal any existing statutory provisions governing the Board of Regents, including those that provide for the election of Board of Regents. However, it would make the board statutory body whose structure, membership, powers, and duties are governed by statutory provisions subject to any statutory changes made through the legislative process. This is no different than so many other boards set forth in Nevada revised statutes. In the lead up to previous sessions, there has been some misrepresentation of information provided to policymakers, including the Nevada Legislature. Assemblyman Roberts and I are encouraged by steps taken in recent years to correct this misinformation. We must be focused on building long-standing and stable systems of governance, not on individual personalities. We owe the citizens of Nevada a culture of accountability in all levels of government. This higher education system belongs to all of Nevadans, all of us who live here in Nevada. It is a collective investment in the future of our state. As you recall, Assembly Joint Resolution 5 of the 79th session which proposed some of the same amendments as SJR 7, passed overwhelmingly in 2 legislative sessions, and we are grateful for the support of our colleagues. Senate Joint Resolution 7 removes the Board of Regents from the Nevada Constitution, but does not substantively change any higher ed policy or procedure. It simply puts the Board of Regents and the Nevada system of higher education on par with every other governing board and state agency created pursuant to statute. Chapter 396 of the NRS would continue to exist and would still comprehensively govern the Board of Regents, and it would still include the requirement of the board be elected. The purpose of SJR 7 is twofold. It allows the legislature to exercise informed and measured governance of NCHE, and it allows more flexibility in considering reform proposals. Constitutional governance serves as an antiquated way to oversee higher education. The reason the Board of Regents was placed in the Nevada Constitution in the first place was to access land granting funding under the Morrell Land Grant Act of 1862 without requiring action by the legislature. Ever since, we have included all the state's higher education governance and administration under this provision, despite a laundry list of studies and analysis recommending the reorganization of the state's higher education structure. It is our belief, with the passage of SJR 7, we will see a resurgence of strong support for NCHE and the Board of Regents. Mr. Roberts and I pledge our support to work with NCHE administration and the board on behalf of the students, the families, and our communities so that we can have the best higher education system in our nation. Chair Miller and committee members, this concludes my testimony. So I would like to turn the presentation over to my colleague, Assemblyman Tom Roberts, who will provide further information about SJR 7.
Thank you, Senator Dondero Loop, and thank you, Chair Miller and committee members. For the record, I'm Assemblyman Tom Roberts, representing Assembly District 13 in Clark County. I'm pleased to join Senator Dondero Loop in my support for SJR 7. I'd like to point out, as set forth in the ballot questions arguments for AJR 5 in 2017 legislative session, that although some other states have elected boards with constitutional status that control and manage particular institutions and programs of public higher education, Nevada is the only state in which a single elected board with constitutional status controls and manages the affairs and funds of the state's entire system of public higher education. In the past, cases before the Nevada Supreme Court and the Board of Regents has asserted that its unique constitutional status gives it virtual autonomy, thus immunity from certain laws and policies enacted by this body. Based on the legislative testimony, these assertions have given some people the impression that the board conducts itself as a fourth branch of government, and that the board, too, often invokes its constitutional status as a shield against additional legislative oversight. Again, as Senator Dondero Loop noted, things have improved in recent years. Nonetheless, this general government structure needs to change. A good example of this is how the university's budget is administered. While the Nevada Constitution requires the legislature to provide financial support for the operation of the state university, it also directs the board to control and manage the funds of the university. This divide between the legislature's constitutional power to fund higher education and the board's constitutional power to direct how those funds are actually spent gives the board virtual unparalleled power within state government to control and manage higher education spending without the same level of legislative oversight typically applied to other executive branch offices. Another component of SJR 7 relates to the administration of federal land grant proceeds that are dedicated for the benefit of the state university. As a bit of background, the Nevada Constitution provides that funding derived by the state of Nevada under the Morrell Land Grant Act of 1862 must be invested in a separate fund and dedicated for the benefit of certain departments of the state university. If any amount of the separate fund is lost or misappropriated through neglect or any other reason, the state of Nevada must replace the lost or misappropriated revenue so that the principal of the fund remains undiminished. Senate Joint Resolution clarifies and modernizes existing provisions of the Nevada Constitution relating to the administration of these federal land grant proceeds. However, because the state of Nevada must administer those proceeds in a manner required by federal law, SJR will not change the purpose of the use of those proceeds. In closing, Senator Dondero Loop and I know that SJR 7 represents a second bite of the apple per se. This time, however, the language in SJR 7 is softened from AJR 5 and now calls for the governance rather than control and management of the state university. Moreover, a biannual legislative audit of the state university and any other public institutions of higher education established by the legislature is also included in SJR 7. This new, gentler language and the audit provision will bring an enhanced level of transparency and trust that our system of higher education so desperately needs. With that, Chair Miller and members of the committee, that concludes our presentation. We urge your support of SJR 7, and this is just the beginning of a long process to bring this forward to the voters, and we hope that you agree that Nevadans should have an opportunity to consider SJR 7 in 2024. At this time, I'd like to introduce, with your permission, Maureen Schaefer of the Citizens for Better Nevada to address SJR 7, and she will be followed by Mr. Warren Hardy of Hardy Strategies, and at the conclusion of their testimony, we will be happy to answer questions. And with your permission, Madam Chair, when I turn it over, may I leave to go back to my other committee and finish my work there, or if you'd like, I could stay here and ask.
Assemblyman, which committee is it?
It is Revenue. And I have a bill presentation
Didn't
up
sound
there.
too confident, but okay, yes,
And I have a bill presentation up there as well.
yes.
But with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Maureen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Maureen Schaefer, and I'm the Executive Director of the Council for Better Nevada. We are a community organization comprised of labor, business, and philanthropic leaders whose purpose is to impact progress on issues that will increase the quality of life for all Nevadans. The Council would like to thank Senator Dondero Loop and Assemblyman Roberts for bringing SJR 7 forward and testify in strong support of the opportunity it presents for greater accountability, transparency, and oversight of the Nevada system of higher education, a system that carries with it a $1 billion biennial budget in taxpayer dollars in the operation of the 7 institutions and the corporate entry office within it. Today, those 7 community colleges, and universities each have their own unique missions, attempting to serve their own student populations, and are working every day to grow in dynamic and creative ways to meet the times in which we all live, and at the same time prepare their students to both navigate and shape a stronger and more sustainable Nevada. Our students' academic success represents a future sustainable Nevada. Yet the state's public investment of nearly $1 billion, which has been a consistent, important priority of this legislature, has been remarkably ranked 16th nationally in per pupil spending, yet has also consistently translated to 46th nationally in college attainment outcomes when we look at what has been accomplished with that generous and thoughtful investment. Nevada can do better. Fortunately, with SJR 7, the legislature understands this call to action, and in particular, that strong governance drives improved transparency and accountability. Nevada has been one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest, states in population growth the last many decades. Our learning institutions have added student numbers, increased diversity, and have responded to their local economy to understand the types of workforce their local communities need to aid our growing economies. However, the governance structure of our higher education system is struggling to be able to respond to opportunities in changing times. Oftentimes, divisive regionalism wins the day over politics of a new and unified and sustainable Nevada. The Board of Regents continue to come under the microscope for various and ongoing fiscal, management, and general information issues the public and you, the legislature, fail to understand and are forced to answer questions either in hearings like this or oftentimes through the media or third parties. More simply, they consistently prove it's a struggle to keep up with the business, academic, and people largesse of their own billion-dollar organization. Change is hard, even when you know you need it, and change management principles suggest most organizations have difficulty reforming chronic legacy issues from the inside. By placing the Board of Regents in the governance of the Nevada Legislature, SJR 7 will enable greater accountability and transparency of the existing Board of Regents and ensure stronger stewardship of the invaluable taxpayer dollars currently invested in the NSHE system. The public trust deserves stronger governance, And with it, the public trust will be restored in a greater capacity in a system that so many families and students and our economy depend on for their higher education experience, and what Nevada depends on for our future economic sustainability and growth. Placing the existing Board of Regent governance structure in the purview of the Nevada Legislature is certainly not the magic bullet or the perfect answer. No public governing institution ever is. However, this change does create increased accountability and greater transparency than does exist today within the current system for Nevadans to understand how current funds are spent or how the board is making decisions on behalf of institutions and its students who learn within it. It's important to note this change implements checks and balances without changing the current regent elected governance. Moreover, and more critically, it will bring SGR 7's bill focus back to students and our economy. The increased transparency and accountability will be a positive step for NCHE as well. All parties, the public, the students, the legislature, and NCHE itself stand to benefit from this evolution. I want to thank Senator Dondero Loop and Assemblyman Roberts for bringing this critical bill forward for increased transparency, accountability, and performance of our higher education system. We urge you to pass SGR 7. Thank you. Senator Hardy.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Warren Hardy today representing the Council for Better Nevada. Chair Miller, members of the committee, we appreciate you taking up this important issue today. And I want to add my appreciation to Senator Dondero Loop and Assemblyman Roberts for bringing this important issue back. I think the sponsors of the bill have done a really good job of sort of outlining the reason and the purpose for it. I would like to just highlight very briefly a couple of things they said and add one more thing for your consideration. At the end of the day, the intent of this resolution and the resolution last time was to bring the Constitution back into alignment with what we believe were the intentions of the framers of the Constitution at the Constitutional Convention. As Mr. Roberts indicated, there was a very specific reason at that time for including a constitutional provision for the regents, excuse me, and that directly aligned with the Morrill Act of 1862, which was just a couple of years prior to the Constitutional Convention. They wanted to be able to do that in order to very timely get those funds in place at the University of Nevada and not have to go through the legislative process to do it. Unfortunately, well, let me back up. So the framers were very, very concerned. If you read the minutes from the Constitutional Convention, you'll understand that the framers were very concerned about doing it that way because they were afraid that it would be interpreted as giving more power to the Board of Regents over the governance of higher education in the state that was intended. And if you read, and I would encourage you to do it because it's a very interesting read, but you'll understand that there's several points on the record where they talk about not wanting to give the impression that there's too much power and authority. Because that was put in, however, there was a Supreme Court ruling many years ago that did opine or did rule that the Board of Regents has, in some very, very narrow instances and very, very narrow cases, some autonomy over the legislature in implementing policy. But again, that was a very, very narrow interpretation to a very narrow set of circumstances. Since that date, and I think I'm just going from memory, Madam Chair, but I think it was in the 1940s. But from that date forward, the Board of Regents has consistently argued that based on that ruling, they have broad autonomy and broad immunity from legislative actions. A simple reading of the Constitutional Convention minutes illustrates that that's simply not the case. And the result of that, which I think ought to be problematic to any member of the legislature and frankly to any voter, the net effect of that is to create a fourth branch of government. And that's problematic in the sense that, you know, we have the most brilliant government experiment in the world that's based on separation of powers and checks and balances. By inadvertently, historically and through culture, creating this fourth branch of government, we've created a branch of government that doesn't have those checks and balances and doesn't have that separation of powers. And that's where the problem comes in, as my colleagues have indicated. And this seeks to resolve that, to bring that checks and balance and separation of powers, and bring the Board of Regents and the system of higher education into the fold, if you will, in terms of legislative oversight that the legislature has on every other agency and department that they fund. I will anticipate the question of why we're bringing it back for a second bite of the apple, and I think we will take some of the blame for that. This is not a knock on the voters, but what we ended up drafting was a very complex, very confusing ballot initiative, and that is not my opinion. That comes from focus groups that we've done, from polling that we've done, and actually from the voter data itself. It's interesting to note that a full 60,000 voters jumped over question 1, did not vote for question 1, and went straight to question 2. That is an unmistakable indication that we developed a ballot initiative that was not well understood by the public. In our data and in our polling, it's clear that most people, or many people, thought that they were voting to eliminate the direct election of the Board of Regents, which was certainly not our intent. So that's the reason for a second bite of the apple, as Assemblyman Roberts put it. It was very narrow, as you know, Madam Chair and members of the committee. And so we think the voters deserve another shot at this with maybe a little better job on our part of defining the issue. I appreciate you letting me ramble, Madam Chair, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you or the committee might have.
Thank you for that. With that, committee members, do we have any questions? We have a question from Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question is pretty simple, but it might take some explanation. How specifically does this differ from question 1 that was just recently defeated by 16 of the 17 counties? And I know, I talked to many people who didn't think it was what you said, Mr. Hardy. They knew that it was just taking it out of the Constitution. So what's different about this that will make it more palatable to the people?
I don't want to jump in if Senator Dondero Loop wants to answer, but there were several things in AJR 5 from the 2017 session that made it appear that this was far broader. There was language in there regarding academic freedom, regarding those types of issues. And so that's what led, I think, to confuse the public. It was clear. Certainly not everybody was confused, and I don't mean to indicate that, but a significant portion was. So this legislation simply zeroes in on the fact that the legislature will take over the governance of higher education. The Board of Regents will still remain in place. The Board of Regents will still be elected. All of the governance structure that's currently in place will still be in place. But this just very clearly specifies that the governance responsibility, or the responsibility for accountability, will be through the legislature. The second thing it does, which we heard unmistakably in our polling and in the data that we collected, is that there was overwhelming, monumental support for the notion of a regular audit of the system of higher education, which has not been done. We've got a separate piece of legislation this session to achieve that. But that's the other place that there's a difference, is placing the emphasis on the auditing. Again, the entire purpose of this legislation from day one has been to create an accountability that exists at the system of higher education, just like it exists at the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Motor Vehicles and every other agency that the state funds. And the state, I think it's the largest budget item, or one of the largest budget items in the state, yet the accountability is not there the way it is for other states. So it's far, to you, Madam Chair, it's far more, to Ms. Dickman's question, it's far more focused on what we're trying to accomplish than the last question was.
And Madam Chair, if I may add just a couple sentences there to the Assemblywoman. This is what I addressed in my remarks. There was literally purposeful misinformation by the opposition, and I believe that most people thought that we were targeting the Board of Regents, which is this bill, this Senate Joint Resolution is specifically just taking them out of the university system out of the Constitution.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome, Assemblywoman, and thank you for that. Our next question comes from Assemblyman Matthews.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, Senator. Thank you for the bill presentation. Good to see you as well, Mr. Hardy. To that issue of accountability, given that regents are, currently elected, and I know would continue to be, but viewed from that perspective, the accountability, theoretically at least, rests, directly with the people of the state who are electing people who campaign for office specifically on issues, germane to the responsibilities of regents. So, whereas, lawmakers, we're responsible for a wide array of issues. And I'm just wondering if you could speak to that issue in terms of how this really does increase that accountability, where in a sense, you could see where that accountability rests now most directly with those who are affected by decisions of the system of higher education, the voters. Thank you.
Mr. Hardy, would you like to start with that one?
Yes, thank you, Senator and Madam Chair. Assemblyman Matthews asks a very good question that I think is important to be a part of the record, because this is largely about accountability, but not just financial accountability. In my experience, in my 30 years or so in the legislature, in many of the occasions where the legislature has reached out and tried to implement policy and tried to have some input into the direction of our higher education, we've gotten pushback to the point of lawsuits from the Board of Regents about the inappropriateness of us as members of, or you as members of the legislature, having the ability to set policy. And so it is about accountability, not just for dollars, but also about the performance of our system of higher education. It's not an attack on the regents. We've had wonderful, wonderful regents, including the mother of one of the sponsors who were remarkable and did a wonderful job with higher education. But it's entirely appropriate for the legislature to have their position heard and have their voice heard and to have input into the policy direction of higher education in this state, and not just simply say, here's $1 billion, get back to us with what you did with it. Which again, there are some through the years on the Board of Regents that believes that is the role of the legislature, to give us the money and let us implement our constitutionally provided right to spend it. And I'll just say to Mr. Matthews, Madam Chair, that I think that's inappropriate. And I think the legislature should have that input. So I hope that answers your Mr. Matthews' question, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Follow up, Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
Yes, thanks. And I appreciate that. And you touched on something that actually gets to my next question. And obviously, you can see where this would increase that accountability and transparency and oversight. The objective, obviously, of any education system is ultimately educational achievement and quality. And it may be difficult to address that in detail, today, but I'm wondering if you can kind of try to connect those dots for me and talk through some tangible ways in which you foresee this down the road, ultimately getting to that chief goal. How is this going to ultimately end up and result in better outputs, better educational achievement from the system? Thank you.
Marilyn Dondero Loop for the record, and then I'll pass this over to Mr. Hardy. But that woman regent that Mr. Hardy was referring to, that I know very well, always said transparency and accountability almost 100% always leads to trust. So when we are making laws and we are funding things. I think that the public deserves accountability. And so I always say with public dollars comes public accountability. And when you have a branch of government, if you will, that does not necessarily fall under that same accountability measure, I think that presents an issue, and it presents an issue to the people that are running that as well. Because if they don't do that, they can be as honest as the day is long, and they can be doing everything 100% right. I mean, we have a Boyd School of Law that's number 60 in the U.S. News and World Report. I mean, we're doing great things in this state, and I think that we want to know those things. Mr. Hardy?
Thank you, Senator and Madam Chair. I think, as usual, the Senator hit the nail on the head. I would only say, from my own experience as a member of the legislature and the time I spent in the Assembly and the Senate, I got a lot of constituent calls about higher education and the frustration that we're very high in funding, but not in some cases as high in performance as we should be. I would add to what Senator Dondero Loop said, however, there are major victories and a lot of good things happening at the system of higher education. I mean, our medical school is a perfect example. Our law school is a perfect example, how it's just shot, to the top in the years it's been in existence. And for the UNLV medical school, every one of our students was placed at a great prominent university for their residencies. So there are wonderful things happening, and certainly don't want to take away from that. But my frustration as a member of the legislature was that I would bring ideas and you almost had to run them by the regents. You almost had to, there didn't seem to be an ability to participate in that process. And any system is better when more folks have an input or an ability to provide input on the policies and the things that should be done. And so it's entirely appropriate for the legislature to share their ideas and bring those things forward and actually see them implemented if they're going to fund, if they're going to continue to fund, if you're going to continue to fund.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I did have one more question, but I don't want to monopolize all the time here, so I'm happy to maybe circle back later if there's time and allow other committee members to ask their questions.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Members, do we have any additional questions? All right, Assemblyman Matthews, would you like to ask your question?
May as well. We're here, right? Thank you. Just last question. Given that the legislature is obviously, as we all know, predominantly made up of representatives from the state's two largest counties, but given also that the system of higher education does serve our rural populations, this might be more of a comment than a question, but there may be a concern that this could potentially further dilute the voice of those colleges in our rural communities. And I don't know if that's something you might address, or perhaps I'm missing something with how this would be applied. Thank you.
Marilyn Dondero Loop for the record. I would just tell you that taking the system out of the Constitution would actually have nothing to do but be able to enhance the state as a whole. Once again, I think we have a fine system. We have two brand new presidents and a brand new chancellor, and I mean, this is a new day. We have wonderful leaders at our universities and our community colleges. And I think that this is a time for us to strengthen our system and move forward. And we have a unique system where it was in the Constitution, and lots of people don't even know that it was started in Elko. I mean, we didn't start the University of Nevada in Reno. So this state has grown. When I was a kid, we wouldn't know Las Vegas would be so big. So I just think it's time for us to do things differently, and this would be one way to do that. And it's not a slight on anyone. It's just asking that if we're going to be awarding money to a system that we have some accountability. Mr. Hardy, anything you'd like to add, please?
Yes, thank you, Senator. Madam Chair, just briefly, I mean, I think that's a good question, and I think it's one worth exploring, but I would respectfully submit, one of the things I used to say consistently in my time in the legislature is that problems of government are best solved at the level of government closest to the people. And I think this will have the effect of bringing higher education policy closer to the people. We've got a board of regents that, a limited board of regents that doesn't have the reach that the legislature has. The legislature in Nevada happily is very well represented in the rural areas. And this will give an additional ability for those constituents to have their higher education points of view heard, considered, and implemented by reaching out to their legislative delegation. So I would respectfully argue that it does a great deal to enhance the access of higher education policy to members of rural Nevada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hardy, and thank you so much, Senator. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just want to check any additional questions from members. Okay, not seeing any. I will go ahead and open it up for anyone wishing to testify in support of SJR 7. So first, is there anyone in the room that would like to approach and testify in support? Not seeing anyone. Broadcasting, can we open up the lines for anyone wishing to testify in support? Again, each person will have up to 2 minutes. And please make sure that you state your name clearly for the record and spell it.
To testify in support of SJR 7, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 927. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Committee Chairwoman Miller and committee members. My name is Hava Ahmed, H-A-W-A-H-A-H-M-A-D, and I am a proud graduate of the Nevada System of Higher Education, representing the Clark County Education Association. CCEA supports Senate Joint Resolution 7, which will provide transparency and accountability to Nevada's System of Higher Education. In 2020, CCEA supported this resolution in the form of ballot question 1, and we wholeheartedly believe the voters deserve the opportunity to vote on this measure with simplified, easy-to-understand language. CCEA supports this resolution because we believe that the K-20 education delivery system in Nevada needs to be well-funded with sufficient transparency and accountability measures to reach the goal of economic diversification in our great state. We know the key to economic diversification and workforce development lies in agility of program development and an abundance of resources to provide our students with a quality education. This is just one step in many that will ensure that $1 billion spent biannually on higher education is strategically spent to improve our student outcomes. It is time we put our student achievement first. CCEA thanks this committee and urges everyone listening to vote yes on SJR 7. Thank you.
Thank you. Broadcasting, do we have anyone else?
We do. Caller with the last 3 digits, 298. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon, Chair and the members of the committee. For the record, my name is Gina Bonjovi, G-I-N-A-B-O-N-G-I-O-V-I, Managing Partner of Bonjovi Law Firm and Chair of the Board of Trustees for the Vegas Chamber. On behalf of the state's largest and broadest-based business association, the Vegas Chamber is in support of SJR 7. We appreciate the work that the bill sponsors have done to bring this proposal forward today. As committee members know, the Vegas Chamber has a long history of engagement on higher education matters because workforce development is a top issue of our employers and our members. The Chamber believes that the passage of SJR 7 is an important component to reform the state's higher education governance structure. Its alignment to meeting the needs of today's students and employers is essential. We all recognize the demands on our workforce are quickly changing, and we need to review how our higher education structure is responding to these changes. Nevada's employers need students who are ready to enter the workforce when they graduate from an institution of higher education, and our economy needs innovation through research that can drive diversification. Governance reform has been an ongoing discussion in this building for many years, and the need to fix our governance structure is still there and should be addressed. We also recognize that the language of AJR 5 that eventually became ballot question 1 was confusing to voters this past November. SJR 7 would provide much needed clarity between the Board of Regents and the state legislature. This resolution would also enact governance reforms that many in our state are seeking. We do recognize that there have been recent efforts by NSHE to align education, but for the long-term benefit of both students and employers, we need a reformed higher education governance structure on which we can depend for the long term. This is good public policy that is based on sound reasoning, data, and facts. We urge this committee to pass SJR 7. I'd like to thank the chair and the members of the committee for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 838. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Vicki Rosser, V-I-C-K-I-R-O-S-S-E-R, UNLV Faculty Senate Chair. I would like to provide a scenario leading to the consideration of SJR 7. At the March Board of Regents meeting, an individual told the board to make a stand against Senate Bill 287 that would allow the UNLV land grant status. UNLV, a minority serving institution, or MSI, has felt for years that we do not receive an equitable share of state resources, but significantly supplement others in the system. That NSHE would even consider holding back UNLV from obtaining land grant status to apply and compete for federal funds is unconscionable. Rather than celebrating the fact that UNLV and MSI will become a land grant, the implication is to deny or oppress the institution of fair and equitable opportunities to compete. We have also become aware that backroom conversations are going on with the legislature and the other institution to stop UNLV's equitable request to continue to pursue greatness for our students and the state as a land grant institution. In a sense, I would like to thank that individual for his comment, as it has reinvigorated the groundswell of support for SJR 7. That this lack of perceived equity and accountability has given cause to move forward in a more aggressive manner to stop the systematic oppression to squelch UNLV, a MSI, equal opportunity and access. Finally, let me remind everybody that previously on question 1, as mentioned earlier, Clark County voted 56.39% in yes votes.
Ma'am?
And that equated to 75%
Ma'am,
of
that
the
is your
state's
2 minutes.
total yes votes.
So if you still have additional comments, we would welcome you to send them in written form so that they can continue to be on the record, but that was the 2 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 452. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Dr. William Bolt. I'm Vice President Emeritus of UNLV, and I've had, in my 49-year career, an opportunity to work with the New York system of higher education at Cornell, the Oregon system of higher education, the California State University system, and the University of California system, and UNLV. Let me tell you how it is to work at UNLV. It's a great institution. Spent 9 years there, wonderful people, wonderful regents. However, the regents don't have the accountability that I have seen with the other institutions that I worked in, states that I worked in. And what happens is there's micromanagement that I've never seen in my career except at UNLV. The level of micromanagement often hurts our students, it hurts our faculty, and frankly, at times, I wondered who I was working for, the Board of Regents or the students and the faculty and the deans and the president. So it isn't easy working in a system like this, and I think the turnover of presidents is something that is evidence. And in working in other systems, it was so refreshing to leave UNLV and to go to Oregon because of the accountability there. And we never had any interference. So I just want you to know that working on the ground at UNLV, wonderful institution, loved my 9 years, probably the best years of my career, but very difficult politically because of the lack of accountability. And it translates to less money in the classroom because of the large budget and that NSHE has in the Regents government. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, the testimony line is open and working. However, we have no more callers in support of SJR 7.
Thank you. Can we close the line for those offering support testimony and open the line for anyone who would wish to testify in opposition? First,
Anyone wishing to
continue. Please continue.
Okay, sorry, Chair, I didn't mean to interrupt. To testify in opposition, says Senate to SJR 7, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits, 010, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Jake Tibbetts. That's JakeTibbitts, and I'm the Eureka County Natural Resources Manager speaking on behalf of Eureka County. So Chair Miller and members of the committee, thank you for allowing Eureka County to provide our opinion and insights on SJR 7. Eureka County is opposed to SJR 7. We note that question 1 that's been discussed based on previous AJR 5 proposed to effectively do the same thing, and it was resoundingly rejected by Eureka County voters with over 76% voting against question 1. This large margin is not due to voters not understanding the question. So beyond arguing about the merits of moving the Board of Regents under direct control of the legislature, we're primarily concerned with and opposed to the provisions on line 13 and 14 of page 5, proposing to amend section 4 of the Nevada Constitution by adding the open-ended power of the legislature to designate additional other departments deemed appropriate for the state university. We believe this language is overreach, it's not advisable, it muddies the waters related to land grant status by including yet to be identified or defined additional departments, not consistent with the original land grant intent and land grant mission. It's crucial from our perspective to retain the land grant mandates identified in the Morrill Act of 1862 and the land grant supplementary acts of Congress, namely the Hatch Act of 1887 and the Smith-Lever Act of 1914. So please, at a minimum, strike this language from SJR 7 if the committee chooses to move forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 486, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller 486, please press star 6 to unmute.
Hi, good evening. Alexander Marks with the Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. NSEA opposes SJR 7 to remove the constitutional provisions governing the election and duties of the Board of Regents. Nevadans made their voices heard when they voted down question 1. Voters supported electing members of Nevada Board of Regents. While NSEA didn't actively engage in question 1, we have a long-standing position to support electing governing boards in education. Elected boards are in place to ensure schools and colleges reflect the values of the people, providing direct lines of accountability to the community. This is the main reason elected boards are preferable to appointed or hybrid models. Appointed officials are shielded by an appointing authority who typically have significant other responsibilities in addition to appointing boards. It's extremely rare to see an elected official voted out of office over actions or conduct of another official that they have appointed. This is truer still with the appointment is made by another deliberative body. Democracy can be messy. Money can have a substantial influence on elections, and sometimes campaigns are negative and turn off voters. Oftentimes, our preferred candidates don't win. And while these challenges are real, they are certainly not enough reason to abandon our system of governance. Instead, we should just continue our efforts to make elections more democratic, and NSCA supports the direction of expanding democracy, and will continue our commitment to engage in increasing electoral participation as well as education. Thank you.
Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 750, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Amy Payson, AMY-PASON, and I'm the Faculty Senate Chair at the University of Nevada, Reno. And I speak on behalf of all academic and administrative faculty on our campus, faculty that are also taxpayers, voters, state employees, and stakeholders directly impacted by this bill. I have submitted written testimony, but I wanted to just highlight a few of the things that are in my written testimony. My faculty have many questions when it comes to the intention of this bill or what the legislature intends, especially in all of the whereas provisions that are in the bill, that this would allow the legislature to take their full legislative powers when it comes to higher education policy. When I teach my public speaking students, I always ask them to provide concrete examples. And so what concrete examples do you have on the checks and balances that you would like to put on higher education? Here's one concrete example I can think of. The furloughs that we were given by the legislature over the summer to address the budget constraints were furloughs that did not have exemptions for faculty who are fully funded by federal grants, nor exceptions for instructors that are paid as little as $3,000 per course. My faculty were not happy that we couldn't get exemptions in these cases. Many of the regents were not happy that they couldn't get those exemptions for the faculty. But we went along with the law. We have to follow the law. So when I had to give this news to my faculty, I had to explain to them that it was the legislature who wrote the law with furloughs. It is a policy that we have to follow. And so really when we're looking at this bill again, we have to ask what comes next. What legislature would this legislature want to do to improve our education? Because this bill is not just a matter of correcting a relationship between the regents and the legislature, but whatever the legislature and policies that are passed, those have to be implemented on our campuses. Those have to be implemented and carried out by faculty. We're the ones that are most affected. So when we hear claims from, especially the lobbyists in this case, about how this will improve education, we ask how? How would you measure educational outcomes?
Your 2 minutes are up.
Until these questions are answered,
Ma'am,
we
your
cannot
2 minutes
support.
are up,
Thank
so
you.
please, if you have any additional remarks, submit them in writing. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 814, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller 814, please press *6 to unmute.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Mark Dubrava, MARK-DOUBRAVA, and I am the chair of the Nevada Board of Regents. I also represent District 7 in Las Vegas. I was elected in 2010 and re-elected in 2016. My term expires in 2022. I am here today to testify in opposition to SJR 7. At the outset, I would like to reaffirm the respect the Board of Regents has towards this committee and the entire Nevada legislature. The board is ready and willing to continue working and collaborating with legislature on the important challenges facing higher education. As this committee is aware, the very issues now presented by SJR 7 were debated and discussed by the legislature for nearly 4 years and ultimately became question 1 on last year's ballot. The constitutional amendments presented by question 1 sought to change 156 years of Nevada history. The people of Nevada rejected those changes. This occurred only 5 months ago. Our democracy mandates that the collective wisdom of the voters be respected. Over the past few years, our two major universities have achieved R1 Carnegie research status. We have two thriving medical schools in Southern and Northern Nevada. We have a top-tier law school and a nationally renowned research institute. We also have a state college. We have a new chancellor, and we have two new presidents at our two major universities. And just today, we completed a search for our new president at Nevada State College. In fact, we have the most diverse group of presidents leading our institutions in our state's history. 4 new regents joined the board just a few months ago. We are at a pivotal time for our students and have new leadership at every level. SJR 7 does nothing to improve higher education in Nevada. It does nothing to advance research. It does nothing to improve workforce development or our communities. Most importantly, it does nothing to help students, the delivery of instruction, the growth of campuses, and the retention of top faculty. Rather, this measure creates a cloud of uncertainty, significantly lowers the morale of our faculty and staff, and impedes our short and long-term strategic goals and planning.
Sir, if you have any additional comments,
you.
please. Thank you so much.
Chair, the testimony line is open and working. However, we have no more callers in opposition to SJR 7.
Okay, thank you. I believe we may have someone here in the room. Is your testimony in opposition? Okay, please proceed.
Thank you, Kent Irvin, ERVIN, for the Nevada Faculty Alliance, the Association of Faculty at NC Colleges and Universities statewide. We are affiliated with the American Association of University Professors, which advocates for academic freedom and shared governance. The NFA appreciates the intent to reform NC and its relationships with the legislature, and we support strong accountability, including AB 416, the audit bill. The fundamental confusion about question 1 was that the ballot said at the top that the election and duties of the Board of Regents would be removed from the Constitution, but then it said nothing would change with the Board of Regents. There was no good answer for exactly what changes could be expected in the future, and so both proponents and opponents were left to speculate. SJR 7 has that same fundamental problem. I would like to point out 2 issues we have with the current bill language. First, SJR 7 removes the clause about academic freedom that was in question 1. The language of that clause, unfortunately, did not have followed the accepted meaning of academic freedom and potentially would have allowed increased political meddling in teaching and scholarship. But the concept is very important. We have suggested a much clearer statement for the protection of academic freedom and a corresponding whereas clause. Please see our submitted materials. Second, the whereas clause that states, whereas amending the Nevada's Constitution to remove the Board of Regents' constitutional status will not repeal, either expressly or by implication, and then some other language, will not repeal the existing statutory provisions that provide for the voters to elect the members of the Board of Regents. That's technically true, but it's misleading because the whole point of SJR 7 is to allow such changes in the future. This whereas clause should be deleted or expanded to explicitly say that future legislatures could change the method of selection and the duties of the Board of Regents, and that's a fair statement to voters. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, we will close the testimony in opposition and open the testimony for anyone who wishes to testify in neutral. Broadcasting, do we have anyone on the line for anyone who would like to testify in neutral?
If you would like to testify in neutral, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the testimony line is open and working. However, we have no callers in neutral on SJR 7.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, we'll close the line for anyone wishing to testify in neutral. And Senator Dondero Loop, do you have any final remarks?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Marilyn Dondero Loop for the record. And I would just like to thank the committee for the wonderful conversation today and the great questions. I would like to thank Mr. Hardy and Ms. Schaefer for joining me, as well as Assemblyman Tom Roberts. And so with that, I urge your support, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Good to see you here. So with that, I will go ahead and close the hearing on SJR 7. Next item we have on our agenda will be public comment. So again, we'll take up to 30 minutes of public comment. Each person will have 2 minutes to speak on something that is under the purview of this committee. And also please remember to state your name and spell your name. With that, broadcasting, will you open the line for public comment?
Anyone wishing to make public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public comment line is open and working. However, we have no callers at this time.
Let's just give it a few moments because we know that we're about a minute ahead, and just give it a moment or two for anyone wishing to call in and make public comment. Broadcasting, does it appear that we have anyone wishing to that's called in for public comment?
Chair, there is still no one on the line to make public comment.
Okay, then I will go ahead and close the agenda item for public comment. With that, just a few reminders of what's happening next week. So we will have a committee hearing on May 4th. And remember, on Tuesday, May 4th, we are taking our committee pictures. So please be here at 3:45 so that we're able to take our pictures before we begin our hearing. With that, I'm sorry, anything else? No, okay. I thought I heard something. With that, I will go ahead and close today's meeting.